This is our first episode in our private pilot series. In this series, we're going to just talk about some of the subjects in the private pilot course, um, and like ground training and flight training, and just some overall topics that are going to help you become a better pilot, and help you get ready for ground school. So to start, we're just going to talk about some of the basic stuff, some of the stuff that I guess comes first before we can actually get into how to fly the plane and that focus stuff. So today we're going to just talk about our medicals, different routes of training, different ratings, and our different pilot endorsements. So when you get your private pilot license, you can think of it as like a driver's license. It's essentially the same privileges. You can drive by yourself. Drive with people. Same with the pilot license. You can fly with people. You can fly by yourself. Act as pilot in command. Um, you can carry passengers. Fly to different airports in the United States. But there is some limitations. You can't get paid to fly. You can't pay less than pro rata share. So what pro rata share means is, let's say me and you go on a flight, right? We're going on a flight, and the operating expenses of that flight come out to be $100. That means I need to pay $50, and then you need to pay $50. So going on a flight, that means you and how many of the people are on the flight, everyone needs to pay an equal share of those operating expenses. So now that you know what a private pilot license is, um, we're gonna get into how you can receive one. So first, it starts with the training. You got to figure out what's the best training for you. So there's two different routes, two different civilian routes that are going to be best for you. So there's either the Part 61 or the Part 141. Now you have to understand that both of these are gonna, if you complete both of these, either one of these, excuse me, you're gonna become a private pilot. You're gonna get your license, but you need to figure out which one is gonna be the best for you with your other stuff going on, you and a job on the side, whatever it may be. You just got to figure that out, right? So the Part 61 training, it's ungoverned from the FAA. So that means, and the FAA, let's talk about that real quick. So the FAA is the Federal Aviation Administration. Um, so you can think of them as like, I guess, I mean, you can think of them as like a DMV almost. Like, it's created just to promote safety in the aviation community. So they're just going to give you, regulations. They're going to give you just some more information, and they just want you to become a safe pilot and keep flying safe. FAA is governing everything um, from pilots license to aircraft registration and everything in between. But for these Part 61 schools, the FAA is not governing them. So what that means is these Part 61 schools, they have a more flexible schedule that they can, keep with their students. So their Part 61s are, you can think of it as like a mom pop flying, right? So what that means is it's going to be more laid back. It's going to be less strict curriculum. It's going to be, I have some pros and cons written down. Uh, it's going to be a flexible training schedule, like we said before. It's going to be better for part-time students. So let's say you have a job on the side, or whatever it may be that's taking up most of your time. This is going to be better for you, because it's going to be a more flexible schedule, and it's more tailored to people who have other stuff on the side. And then a benefit of a Part 61 school is you have the ability to choose your flight instructor. So what that means is you can interview different flight instructors at that Part 61 school, and whichever one you feel is best for you, you can obviously pick them and use them. But there's some cons with the Part 61 school. Um, it is less structured compared to that Part 141, which we'll talk about in a second. And then let's say you want to become an airline pilot. You're gonna have to receive more total hours to get to that airline job. So with the Part 141 schools, there are less hours required. So I'm pretty sure the hours, as of right now, the hours are 1,500 to be eligible for the airlines, and that's if you go through the Part 61 school. But then it's 1,000 hours if you go through that Part 141 school. So 500 hours is a big difference. So that's up to you if you want to become an airline pilot or not. but that's just something to be aware of when choosing Part 61 or Part 141 school. So now, after we talk about that Part 61, how it's ungoverned and the FAA doesn't really, watch it as much and keep up with it as much, we're going to talk about these Part 141s, which is honestly the complete opposite. So with these Part 141 schools, they're FAA approved. So the FAA is attaching their name to these schools, right? They're associating their name with these schools. So what that means is the FAA is going to be regulating everything from the textbooks used, the curriculum, even the class sizes. So it's gonna be pretty strict, but you can rest assured that you're gonna be receiving a really great training at some of these Part 141 schools. Um, so let's go through some of the pros and cons of it. So one of the benefits of a Part 141 school is you're gonna have a more structured curriculum. So that means you're gonna be following a set a set curriculum. You can expect and follow a tight schedule, so you're not like guessing what you're going to be doing on each flight lesson and ground lesson. So that some students might like that, some students might not like that. It's more tailored to full-time aviation students. So these Part 141 schools they're trying to make captains, you know what I mean, and they're trying to make captains and trying to make other aviation professionals. So these schools are going to be really really strict with their training and curriculum, but it's going to be more in depth and it's going to be to me a better training. And then the other last benefit that we have is you have the ability to finish in fewer hours, and that's what we talked about before compared to these Part 61 schools. Is if you go to the airline jobs, you're going to need 500 less hours. But also with these Part 141 schools, let's say you're on top of it, you're hitting all your check marks, you're hitting all your stage checks and passing them with flying colors and everything. There's no reason for you to be taking more hours when you're already prepared for the check ride and all your other tests to receive your license. So as long as you're proceeding ahead of schedule, there's no reason for you to be taking more hours. So it could cost you less in the long run. But some of the cons of a Part 61 school, the curriculum can be strict for some students and overwhelming. But that's not to discourage anybody or anything like that. These Part 141 schools aren't meant to break you at all. They're just challenging. You know what I'm saying? So it's not gonna be like like a walk in the park. Like you show up and you do what's the lesson plan for the day. Like you got to come prepared. You got to study on your own time. It's a lot of studying and it's a lot of stuff that they cover in these Part 141 schools. So you just need to be ready for that. Another con is some Part 141 schools have a pre-selected instructor for you. So sometimes you and your instructor may not be seeing eye to eye, but you're stuck with them. Or, you may feel like your instructor isn't giving you, the full, picture and everything. Like they're half-assing it, but you're stuck with them. So that's something that you got to watch out for these Part 141 schools. So when you decide which training route you want to go to, the Part 61 or Part 141, then comes your medicals. Before you can get in the cockpit or be eligible to fly, you need to get a medical. Let's say you've played a sport in high school or whatever it may be. Before the season, you had to go get a physical, right? So they're just checking to make sure you're healthy enough to go get on the court, go hoop, or go play football or whatever it is, right? And that's similar to a medical, right? But a medical is just making sure that you're healthy enough to get in that cockpit and be responsible for the aircraft and the people in that aircraft. So there's different types of medicals and different durations for the different classes of the medicals. So we'll take a look at them right now. There's first class and a second class and a third class medical. So for the private pilot, the minimum requirement for your medical is the third class medical. So the third class medical is going to be, covering on that exam, the medical exam, which is performed by an AME. It's just a medical examiner that the FAA approves to, conduct these physical examinations and make sure you're healthy enough. So you can't go to any other doctor. You can't go to a physician, but on the FAA website, they have a list of AMEs in your area. So, like we were saying before, for the private pilot license, your medical the minimum medical that you're going to need to fly is a third class medical. So those are for the third class medical is going to the privileges that are associated with that medical are going to be sport, recreation, and private pilot, and a couple others. But we're focusing on the private pilot in these episodes. So that's a minimum requirement that you're going to need. So if you can't get this third class medical, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to receive your private pilot license unless you go through a program called Basic Med. We're not really going to touch too much on Basic Med in this episode, but that's going to be a segment of this episode. Our second class medical, there's going to be those privileges are mainly for commercial pilots, so pilots who are getting paid to fly, and I'm pretty sure it's for second officers or first officers, excuse me, for airlines. And then for our first class medical, that's our highest medical that you can receive. It has the total packages, all the privileges fall under the first class medical. So if you get that first class medical, you're set, you're straight. Those first class medicals are more tailored to ATPs, so airline transport pilots. They're also good for every other pilot and every other aviation professional. So let's talk about the durations on some of these. So for the third class medical, it's a little different. So the FAA likes to have two different categories of duration. Over the age of 40, your medical is going to be good for 2 years, right here. So every 2 years, you're going to need to get another medical where they're going to check your heart, your hearing, your eyesight, your balance, your motor functions, all that type of stuff to make sure that you're healthy and you're safe enough to get into that cockpit and be able to fly. And now if you're under the age of 40, it's going to be good for 5 years. So every 5 years, you need to go to your AME and get your examination done. For a second class medical, if you're over the age of 40, it's good for 12 months. And if you're under the age of 40, it's good for 12 months. So every 12 months, no matter if you're over or under the age of 40, you're going to need to get that medical examination done. First class medical, if you're over the age of 40, it's good for 6 months. If you're under the age of 40, it's good for 12 months. You can kind of see how these are going up, I guess it's going down in duration, because the higher the classes, they want to make sure that they're not missing anything and you're not developing any type of illness or losing your medical, with the more privileges that you gain. So that's why it's going up with each class, and the durations happen to be shorter. So let's say you don't get your medical, right? Let's say you're over the age of 40 for your third class medical, right? And 2 years, it's 2020 right now, and let's say in 2 years you miss your duration, you pass your duration and you miss your examination, right? Your medical examination. You're not going to be able to fly. Legally, you are not allowed to fly without a medical. So that's something that you really need to stay on top of and make sure that you're being diligent on is keeping up with your medicals. Alright, so now let's say you got your medical, let's say you got your first class medical, you're all set to fly, alright? You chose which training route you want to go to, your Part 61 and Part 141. Now, regardless of which one you go to, it's the training is broken down into ground training and flight training. So with the ground training, it's going to be teaching you different aspects and different subjects on aviation. It's going to be weather theory, aerodynamics, flight planning, navigation, all types of different topics that are going to help you become a better pilot and prepare you for this FAA Knowledge Exam. So the FAA Knowledge Exam, also called the written test, is a 60-question test that you need to pass with higher than a 70%, which is going to cover everything that you learn in your ground lessons. So it's really important to stay on top of those ground lessons. You can take the exam as many times as you want, but it's going to cost, and it doesn't look good if you're taking the exam 12 times. So after you take that, the ground lesson or the written test, it's the flight training. You can't take the flight training before the ground, but you can take the ground and the flight at the same time simultaneously. But the flight training is going to prepare you for the practical exam, also called the check ride. where they're gonna test everything that you've learned in your flight training, what you're gonna do with your instructor. Um, so they're gonna test your stalls, your diversions, your different maneuvers, your different navigations. Um, they're testing you to make sure that you're able to fly the plane by yourself. It's a big responsibility, so it's not going to be something that's easy. Make sure that you're come flight training that you're um, hitting all of your check marks and making sure that you're asking questions when you don't understand something, and just studying hard. So when you go through the ground and the flight training, you pass both of those tests. You pass your written exam and you pass your practical exam, your check ride. You'll receive your private pilot license. So your private pilot license is going to, on the license itself, it's going to say single engine airplane, depending on if you do a single engine training. So most of you right now watching this, you're not gonna receive a private pilot license in a multi-engine plane, but it is possible to do that. It's just a little rare. So what that means is you're able to fly single engine planes on the land. So single engine land. With the private pilot license, a cool thing with that is even though you're receiving your license and you're only able to fly what's on your license, so you're only able to fly the single engine airplanes, you can receive different ratings and different pilot endorsements. So the difference between ratings and endorsements, the ratings you're going to need more training and you're going to need to retest, only for a couple of them actually. For helicopter and glider, you're not going to have to take the complete set of tests. But anyway, so for the ratings, you're going to need to take the test, and for the pilot endorsements, you're actually not going to need to take an actual exam. They're just going to need to receive extra training from someone who is, tail wheel endorser, or they're able to fly these types of endorsements, right? So we'll talk about the ratings first. So what's cool about these different ratings is they essentially they up your privileges. So with the instrument rating, what that is you're able to fly the aircraft solely looking at the instruments without looking outside of the aircraft at all. So it's extremely helpful, because the leading causes of pilot accidents is when pilots who are they're VFR approved, which means you can fly when it's nice out, when you're able to visually see where you're going. We'll talk about some VFR minimums in some different episodes, but when these VFR pilots fly into these IMC IFR conditions, so what that means is, let's say it's a really nice day out, it's a clear day, it's a nice temperature, nice dew point, everything. We're going up, we're flying, and then we didn't check the weather, right? So now we're up in the air, and a thunderstorm's coming in, right? So now the thunderstorm's coming in, and now the clouds are rolling in too, and now we're not able to see. So that's a situation of VFR pilots flying into these conditions where they're not rated and approved to fly into, and unfortunately they fly into terrain, or they fly into the ground. So it's a lot of CFIT accidents caused by pilots flying into these conditions that they're not approved for. So that's instrument rating. Multi-engine is self-explanatory. You're able to fly two-engine airplanes, multi-engine airplanes. That's a big one too, because multi-engine airplanes, they usually go faster. There's two engines, so it's a lot more stuff that you're going to need to be aware of and be conscious of when you're flying the aircraft. Seaplane is pretty cool. Seaplane is also called float plane, where you're able to take off and land on water. That's a really cool rating. Commercial is being paid to fly. Helicopters, being able to fly helicopters, and gliders are pretty cool too. They're pretty much planes without engines and really long wingspans, and they glide. So, but we'll talk about some of the pilot endorsements. So, like we said before, these pilot endorsements are going to be they're going to be something that you get written in your logbook, and it allows you to fly a tailwheel aircraft, fly high performance, and the list goes on, right? So a tailwheel aircraft is different to a conventional landing gear. So it's all about the landing gear of the aircraft. So the tailwheel, it's different from a conventional and a nose landing gear. So On normal, I guess, landing gears, probably what you're gonna fly in your flight training, it's gonna have two side wheels and one nose wheel, right? So that's gonna be your landing gear. And it's gonna be different when you're in flying or your flight training, and you're landing. You do your first landing and everything. You're gonna flare, and what that is pulling back on the stick right before you reach the ground and you enter the ground effect and everything. But with the tail wheel, it's different since your nose wheel isn't there. You have the two side wheels. You have the two side wheels and one small wheel in the back. Which is really important. So it's different than the nose gear that we talked about before. And what's really important with the tail is you got to be really coordinated on your rudders, because if you're landing and you're not coordinated on your rudders, you can enter tail spins, and that can cause all different problems. So that's why it's really important to get really good training on those tail wheel for your tail wheel endorsement. High performance aircraft are aircraft that can fly, that have better performance, that can climb faster, that can cruise faster, that can, hold more weight, and that can fly faster than 200 knots. So that's a really important one, because if you get in one of these aircrafts and you don't know what you're doing, that's irresponsible, and you can obviously hurt yourself and hurt others. So the high performance aircraft, you definitely want to get really great training for that endorsement. There's definitely people in your area who are approved to give you these trainings and these lessons. Complex aircraft are aircraft with retractable landing gears and movable flaps, and they're just more complex. So there's more stuff that you need to be aware of in terms of parts on the aircraft, and how to use those parts. And that's what complex is. High altitude is self-explanatory of just flying higher in altitude, and you need to be really conscious and aware of your oxygen limitations and your oxygen requirements. We'll get into that in another episode. But that's really the majority of it. So with the pilot facts, I hope you learned something. But we talked about a lot of this right here. So after you go through this, you hit your medicals, you find out your training, and you study hard, and you get your check marks, and you hit your stage checks and everything. There's no reason why you can't do it. Flying is such a cool thing. It's way different than driving a car. I'll tell you that right now. It's different. How many people can say they can fly by themselves? To start all this training and do everything that we just talked about, you need to be at least 17 years old, and you need to be fluent in the English language. So you need to be able to read and write. Why 17? I don't know why the FAA picked that. But it's different. But the English, so with English is the language used among in aviation. So when you're talking on the radios and you're talking to other pilots, you need to make sure you're able to speak English. So that's pilot facts, and that's our first episode of Left Seat Club. I hope you found this helpful and informative, and stay tuned. Our next episode is going to be pretty cool.